I love what you've done, Kate, because you are reframing a midlife crisis into something kind of joyful. You are reclaiming it from men in red sports cars with a medallion, and you're making it something that is great for us women. Tell me more about it.
Well, I just think we've been neglected. Our midlife crisis has been neglected forever for women. And we really have a much more serious midlife crisis because our brains completely rewire around menopause and perimenopause. So there's about a 15 to 20 year brain change going on that nobody knew about until recently. And then, we've got questions with our fertility, our families, we're looking after older people, our domestic burdens have changed, maybe we have none. And I just think this is the great leap forward and we should really be enjoying it. And one of the ways we're going to enjoy it is if we know about our health and if we know about our mental health and if we know about all the mad things we can do. Because I'm very keen that people get quite eccentric at this point in their lives. And I personally have got quite eccentric. I now climb trees, things like that. I go wild swimming. I don't care what I say to anyone anymore. And I think there's a great joy in that liberation of self.
So true. That losing of filters, that ability to say no and have boundaries and just do some, like you say, do some mad things. We're not so worried about being judged for the choices that we make because we do have that kind of effort filter and I'll do exactly what I want. We come out of menopause quite strong, I think, after the trickier parts. Let's go back to what you just mentioned, trying out some wild things. And one of the things that I know you love doing is wild swimming. Tell us a bit more about that. And also, what are the benefits for us as women, as men, in fact, but as anybody? There are incredible benefits, aren't there, that are scientifically backed?
Yeah. Well, my wild swimming is done with my friend Deborah Ross, who's a film critic and a TV critic. And we go to Parliament Hill Lido, which is freezing all year round just about. And it's free once you're 60 in the morning. And basically, I get film reviews as I freeze to death swimming up and down in the Lido. And that is absolutely fantastic. We call it Chatty Lane. And there's a group of women who go up and down, yabbering away. And occasionally, we swim 5 lengths of the crawl. But really, it's a joy. And also, when you're feeling really crap in winter and it's November and it's raining and you can't get out of bed and you hate everybody, and you know that she is waiting for you at the pool and she's going to be angry if you don't turn up.
You've got to show up, haven't you?
So you've got to show up. That's why you need a friend. And we do it 3 days a week. Sometimes my partner comes too. But it makes a huge difference to all of our mental health. It just gives us an enormous kick up the arse in the morning, a very joyful one. And a lot of the time you see the dawn, you see the sun, and the weather never matters because if it's raining, you're already wet and you watch the big blobs of rain bounce off the water and you laugh. And somehow it just gives you a kind of whole piece of freedom. And I've looked at all the studies in the book and basically, even just one dip couple of times a week really improves your immune system, really improves your brown fat, which burns, energy much better. It just is really, really good for you. And there's these great studies they're now doing, which are also in the book, on depression and swimming and the effect it has compared to antidepressants. And there were a group of people, they gave them antidepressants and stuck them on the beach in the light, and there was a group of people, they said, get in the water, it's freezing. And the people who got in the water had a much, much better improved mood, even though they were still getting the same kind of level of social life and outdoor life. So it obviously just resets your body into kind of, oh my God, this is such a shock, everything else for the rest of the day is better. So yes. Do you wild swim? Do you go in the cold?
And it doesn't actually have to be as dramatic. I mean, it's very fashionable, very trendy. A lot of people are really into this cold water swimming or getting in a cold tank. But I mean, you could just start off with 30 seconds of cold water in the shower. That has been shown to have quite significant benefits. And then you sort of work up to 60 seconds. Yeah. In my case, I might work up to 5 seconds. I always mean to, and I never seem to have enough time. But I do see the absolute benefit of that. And I think also, as you say, when you've got a friend that's waiting there for you, you do create a little bit of a sisterhood and a tribe, which I think becomes more and more important to us as women as we get older. We rely on those female bonds and that connection. But I do believe that there is a little bit of, I can't call it snobbery, but You're not very impressed when people turn up in a dry robe, are you?
Oh no, I do. I'm on the side of the dry robes.
Oh, you
but
like
there
the
is
dry
a very
robe.
strong anti-dry robe movement out there, and there's a whole I think there's a Facebook group which is called Dry Robe Wankers, which is pictures of women wearing them. Now, what we don't approve of is people who are wearing them just to walk around town or walk their dog. We think it should be worn very, very seriously at the pool. But it does make a huge difference, because I have that thing called Raynaud's syndrome, you know, where the ends of your fingers are freezing.
Yes.
And I get very cold, and it really, really makes a big difference, because the changing rooms are unheated at Parliament Hill Lido. To stick on a big dry robe in December, it really has been a game changer, and you know, it's kind of fun.
And the crazier the design, the better, right? The more
really
wild
matter,
the design, like nice colours and a bit mad. But
yeah.
Well,
so,
I love.
So there's yeah, go on.
No,
the
you
other
can.
thing I was thinking is, you know, we all think about our bodies, you know, and worry about our bodies, even though we've got quite mature bodies. And, you know, being in the showers with a bunch of naked women who really do not give a damn every day. And there's people who have breast operations. There's people like me who've had 3 kids and have got stretch marks and a bit of a tummy. You know, all that. It just makes you feel so honest about your body, and everybody works and everybody can swim. And we've all got these very different bodies, from a Lucy and Freud kind of magnificent body to a wee skinny body. And you feel like none of that matters. It just takes you back to your sort of essence. And actually, you know, even though I can intellectualize stuff about my body, emotionally, I'm still a bit of an idiot, you know. And so it was really, really lovely to kind of be in that world every couple of days and just feel like I am me, I am naked, and I don't care.
It's rare, isn't it? I can't honestly think of a time, in decades, when I have taken all my clothes off in front of a group of people. Maybe at a party that I don't remember. No, but I mean, just generally, I don't think women have much confidence doing that. So I can only imagine how liberating that must be, to just strip down, and bodies are not a thing. Your body's just there. You should be proud of what your body is. I would love to do that. I don't think I'm brave enough. I really don't.
Well, you should come with me. Come up for one morning on Saturday and I'll take you.
I might be up for that. I'll give it a go. Well, look, you cover so many other things. What I love about your book is it's thoroughly researched. You've got incredible experts that you have talked to. You also you weave in a lot of stories of real people, so you feel like you can connect on that level as well. And you cover a lot of subjects. A lot of women of our age do experience this.
Oh, yeah. Well, that means, so what a great word. It just means feeling flat, really.
Yeah.
Not taking any joy in anything. And really that comes to a lot of people in perimenopause, and perimenopause can be anywhere in your 40s. You have no idea where it's going to land, because we know it's menopause's dastardly little sister. So it crashes in there and you start feeling flat and not enjoying things as much, because your estrogen is lower, and estrogen works with serotonin in the brain and keeps it going and keeps you up. And when it's suddenly gone, and it can take huge leaps and plunges, you can suddenly really have quite a lot of crashes and be kind of just very sad and not want to go out. And I don't think anyone is explained to us enough about these brain changes. And so there's the business of the slight feeling of depression. We most women know this is not depression like clinical depression, because they know nothing's changed in their lives, but suddenly everything's a bit meh. And, you know...
And you can't put your finger on it, can you? Not a specific thing.
Yeah, and also the combined with that, there's the rage, because women get quite angry, and because their progesterone is going down too, and the progesterone is really crashing, and that is your calming GABA hormone. And when that is right down very, very quickly, quite often, you just don't have that calm, you don't have that buffer, and you're not sleeping so well, because you've got that anxiety in the night, you've got that 4 a.m. wake up. All these things are conspiring against you together, so you're not getting enough sleep, your estrogen is going down, and suddenly sometimes peaking as well, and you are just, you know, hormonal orchestra gone incredibly wrong. And, you know, there are ways of dealing with it, and immediately once you know what's happening, that is already a step forward, because you can kind of watch yourself from the outside and say, I'll be better in a day or two, or I'll cope with it in this way. But what I realised writing this book, and it is huge, and I think the menopause conversation, although we had this amazing conversation in Britain, round the world and in certain medical establishments, they are not clearly across menopause and mental health. And I do a massive thing in one of my chapters, really, because I had a lot of problems too in one of my chapters. And I talk to the people who deal with people with serious mental health problems like being bipolar or, serious depression. When you add the menopause or hormonal crash to that, that can really send people back into hospital. Psychiatrists and psychotherapists are really not trained in the menopause. Psychiatrists don't prescribe HRT very often, almost not at all. But yet there's a whole group of women from 45 to 55 turning up suddenly for the first time in their lives. Nothing has changed. So the serious mental health element, the appearance of things like bipolar disorder, serious depression, it's just not being acknowledged enough, the connection with that and hormonal change. And I'm really keen to educate psychotherapists and psychiatrists, and I'm working with a couple of groups actually on that now as a new campaign to bring the hormones into people's heads and that conversation, because it's so important. And HRT makes a huge difference to the majority of women. So it's really,
and of course, you do know what you're talking about. You revolutionized menopause in many ways. Your incredible book, Everything You Need to Know About the Menopause, but we're too afraid to ask. And then, of course, your documentaries that you did with Davina McCall, people still talk about that being the moment when people started understanding what was happening to their bodies, and we started that shift into not being scared about talking about it in public or being embarrassed or feeling like it's the beginning of the end, the shriveling up, the drying up, it is a huge time of flux. But what still surprises me, and goes back to HRT as well, we learned so much from that, but we're still not seeing enough change in the NHS, because like the 40 plus health check still doesn't talk about perimenopause, menopause or osteoporosis. Why? I mean, I know people like you and Davina, Louise Newsom, so many incredible menopause warriors in this field, the Menopause Charity, the Menopause Mandate. You all try so hard to be heard, and yet a fairly basic change to this health check would change the lives of so many women by dealing with their health before rather than after. Let's not wait until that stable door has closed. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, it's been really frustrating because we've been up there in Parliament, we've been with Caroline Harris, we've had a meeting on osteoporosis in the House of Commons, we've done everything, and so has Menopause Mandate. What we need now, my only thought now, is the NHS is just sitting there like a fatberg, not changing. But we also know that Wes Streeting, is really interested as Minister in changing the NHS. My theory is we kidnap Wes Streeting for 5 minutes and explain to him how hormones work in the female body and say, Wes, how could you save, 4 billion a year? Give women who've got, before they get osteoporosis, give them estrogen, progesterone and testosterone is also good for osteoporosis. You could save billions. How would you reduce your diabetes bill by a third, Wes? Well, guess what? HRT, getting your estrogen right and getting your diet right, informing women, that will make a big difference too. Would it be good to lower cardiovascular disease, Wes? Yes, because, women who take transdermal HRT are far less likely to get a stroke, etc., etc. So, it's an absolute no-brainer. The Menopause Charity have done a superb paper on this, which they did send to the government, which looks at all the science in terms of longevity and better health, not just hot flushes, but the effect keeping your hormones going will have for the rest of your life. Also, it's not like we've got anything to prove. If you look at women who are in early menopause in their 30s and 40s, they are far more likely to get cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis and dementia. I think it is a crime that we are not getting that message out, and we are doing the best we can. And I'm hoping this book, again, will do it, because this book doesn't come labelled menopause, because menopause is only part of it. This book is about longevity, and it's both intellectual longevity but bodily longevity, and how we will come into our powers. And I don't think people understand that menopause is a massive metabolic event that puts them at risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis and all these things. And the minute they do, they are on it. Women are on it. You tell women the information and you give them the science, which is what these doctor influencers on Instagram and on television have been doing. And it comes from women up, because women are brilliant at protecting their own health and finding out stuff from one another. And it is a big piece of sexism, I think, up there at the top. And it's also a horror in the medical establishment that there are people out there with AI, with everything, that can read the science papers that were locked up in universities. And we can find stuff out, and we're not that stupid. And once you've been taught how to read these papers, you can really, really research very, very accurately back to kind of 1994 and things, and know your stuff. And oh my God, I know a lot of stuff. And I really, really care about it. And there are lots of people like me who are kind of journalist activists. And, you know, we are learning every day. And if there's a new study, I get an alert on my phone every day. And I work with groups of doctors. And I just feel this is what someone in the NHS should be doing too.
So we need to kidnap Wes Streeting. We also need to debunk them. Another thing that you mentioned is a crime against humanity, is the report that came out over 20 years ago now, linking HRT to breast cancer. Now, that has been debunked. Can you tell us the benefits? There's so many benefits of taking HRT. Of course, it's not for everyone. It's not possible for that to be right for everybody if there's, you know, certain underlying conditions or a cancer background or so on. But for the majority of women, they can go on HRT, and it's not just for our menopause, is it really?
No. It really is. I think clearly it's for mental health. I think it helps to keep us very, very sharp. I think it's really important for memory and, you know, and all those metabolic things. And one of the chapters in the book talking about HRT, because, I mean, HRT makes you live about 4 years longer. You live a better life. You live a healthier life for longer, which I think is incredibly important. But I do have a chapter, and there was a bit of a dispute of the title of the chapter, which is called Midlife Muffin Top, How to Avoid Midlife Muffin Top. And they said, oh, you can't say that about people. And I said, well, actually, we need to talk about fat in midlife because it's a different kind of life. I am not fat shaming. I am fat explaining. And people need to understand that the kind of fat we build up in midlife is because our hormones aren't there. So when the estradiol, which is the great hormone you get back in HRT, when that leaves the building in your late 40s, early 50s, your body compensates by making a not so good estrogen called estrone. And guess where it makes it? Round your middle, like a little spare tire. That midlife muffin top that hangs over your jeans, that sudden kind of sagginess in the middle, that is your body usually trying to build up estrone. And your body reacts differently to protein, to insulin, you know, its cholesterol changes. It behaves in a different way than it did 10 years ago. And that's because it's trying to compensate. And that fat is with estrone in it, that fat built up, puts you at a higher risk of breast cancer as well. It's really, really worth knowing that, you know, that visceral body fat is not what you want. And in fact, what you want to do, even if you're not taking HRT, is build muscle. You want to build muscle to burn that away, and you want to seriously weight lift. And obviously that's very hard to say to people who are working 10 shifts a week in Sainsbury's, looking after their grandkids, living somewhere where there's not space to go to the gym or something. You know, there's a lot of middle class people telling other people who are very stressed what to do. But one thing you can do is get HRT to everyone and make sure it's the right proportions for them. And from that basis of having a body that is not desperately trying to compensate and make estrone around the middle, you can begin to move on and make the rest of your life healthier. So often HRT is the first step off the ground that will just make you feel better, and then you'll get off the sofa and then you'll start moving and your brain will be working better. So I feel really strongly about getting, you know, this information out to everyone and not to just, you know, a sort of Instagram elite.
Yeah, and that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, you mentioned there about weight-bearing exercise, and I know we both know Davina Mehta, who advocates exercise snacking. You don't have to go to the gym for that. You can be lifting tins of baked beans if you want to. You can do your press-ups against a kitchen counter. Kate Roham is also a wonderful advocate for exercise and getting those weights into your life in some way. But that really, it's so important for us. HRT improves bone density and promotes growth. So that's another thing that is not discussed at that NHS 40 plus. That you should be looking after your bones. And having a DEXA scan at the age of 65, it's all a bit late then, isn't it? Because then you could have bones that are like sponge.
Yeah, we absolutely need preventative medicine, and the HRT is great. But the other thing, if you can't take HRT, and I went and did studies on this because we did a big campaign called Give Your Bones a Break to try and get this message out. And I looked at the kinds of exercise the NHS were advising people to do and what was actually working. And of course, walking around the block isn't really enough. It's something, but it ain't going to really change what's happening to your bones. You've got to really stress your muscles by lifting heavy weights. So you want to be doing, not the little pink weights. You want to have big, decent number of kilograms, be pulling them up. And you can do a 5-minute video. I do a 5-minute video off YouTube, but with quite heavy weights. So by 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, but it's really, really quick. And doing that and also jolting your body, like, doing a sort of arm lift and then landing, jumping down onto your feet. The jolting is really important because it wakes your bones up and it gets them working, and bones work on hormones, of course.
Never heard that before.
Pumping, hopping also good.
And skipping, how about skipping?
Skipping good. Storming up and down the stairs angrily, very good for bones.
Good at that. I think every woman could do that.
But the numbers are interesting because, HRT can increase your bone density between 7 and 10% over a couple of years. The actual weightlifting in one trial in America increased bone density by 3% in 8 months. So probably, these trials are not done yet, but, you may be looking at 5 or 10% over a number of years. And, and that was really heavy weightlifting, including landing and jumping. So that's it. So lift heavy, jolt yourself a bit, and that is what makes a difference. And you could go and take one session, or just get this on YouTube. You can really find, and a fantastic woman who's really good is called Dr. Vonda Wright, and she's on Instagram, and she's really worth following because she's into all that, and she's a proper bone doctor as well, and you can learn a lot, and it's something you can do at home. Except kitchen counter, I was doing push-ups on my kitchen counter where my legs leave the floor. And there's now a big crack from the corner of the kitchen counter because I put all my weight on it. So don't do that.
So be careful. I think it's worth saying as well that this is not going to turn you into Mr. Universe. No. It doesn't create enormous biceps that are, look somewhat unattractive. All it does is pinpoint that bone health and tone your muscles and help that protein be energized within your body for the right reasons. Every woman over 40 should really be, well, probably younger than that, every woman really should be doing some kind of weight bearing, and it's not just a walk around the block. Let's move on to something that I know you're quite passionate about discussing, and that is the Great UTI Scandal. It's not something that you hear discussed very much, the Great UTI Scandal. I don't think I know a woman who hasn't had a UTI, to be honest. I think everybody gets them, but they can be really dangerous, can't they?
A huge cause of hospital admissions and sepsis eventually. And also, even in the case of my own mum, who had Alzheimer's and was living at home, and she was 80-something, and she got a terrible UTI one summer when her carers didn't turn up for a couple of days and I was away on holiday, and went into hospital, and that UTI affected her mental health incredibly, and actually she never walked again. And for older women, it's not just a bunch of antibiotics. It can really take away the last shreds of their ability and strength to hold on. So I was very aware of that, but at that point I had not heard of estrogen having any effect on a UTI. And then I started talking to doctors, and everybody was saying, well, estrogen makes a big difference to UTIs. We get far less UTIs if we're taking estrogen, particularly vaginal estrogen, which should be called vulval estrogen, but you can rub cream or gel or whatever all over your vulva, or take a pessary, and it's all free on the NHS, and you can do it for the rest of your life, and you can do it if you've had breast cancer. Doesn't increase any risk of anything, and there's a lot of different preparations out there. Everybody, or pretty well everybody, should be taking vaginal estrogen one way or the other. If you've got HRT, it's already systemic in your body, so quite often we don't need it so much if we're on HRT, but it really, really helps. And what I came to understand writing the book, which was a joy, was the vagibiome, the vaginal microbiome. Didn't know about that. And of course, we all talk about the stomach microbiome with Tim Spector and, how we need probiotics and all that for that. Nobody talks about the vaginal microbiome enough. And 50% of people have one. And in there are all these bacteria. And what I came to understand quite simply is the sort of good bacteria, lactobacilli, which are the kind you get in yogurt and kefir and things like that. And you can also take a pill which has that effect too if you don't have the right lactobacilli. And you need that to fight off the E. coli, I mean, when you think about it, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? We all know E. coli bad, and that's what's caused, or that's one of the things that's causing your UTIs. So basically, there's a war going on in your vaginal biome. And if you arm your people down there with estrogen, which helps, and that helps increase the numbers of different bacteria, it makes it a sort of happy environment. And lactobacilli. And I found, particularly, I was missing something called lactobacilli rhamnosus, and there's another one called crispatus. There's about 4 different ones, but these supplements are often really good, plus the estrogen. And I really don't get UTIs at all anymore. And I was a bit of a UTI, manufacturer.
Yeah.
And
repeated, yeah.
It increases in your face. And, if you're prone to them, you're prone to them. And so paying a little bit of attention to what is going on in your vagi biome. And I just love it. I love that I've got a new word. I know what it does. And I know I can change it, which is kind of really liberating, that we've just sat there and killed every piece of good bacteria with antibiotics. We don't need to do that anymore. We can maintain that healthy, atmosphere down there. So
well, it's sort of, we're getting much better about talking about embarrassing body parts down there and not using euphemisms for them so much. But when you think about it, it makes sense. As you age, your skin everywhere changes and gets sort of more papery and more wrinkled and more dry, and you pop a serum on your face to keep it looking sort of more plumped up, and you kind of need to do it there as well.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing here is, the cream increases your collagen down there, and so it all gets softer and the tissue gets softer, and it's better to have sex, and it's less likely to crack or anything like that and cause an infection. So fantastic. We're all lovely and spongy down there. It makes our life so much better. But I use it particularly, I actually get it privately because it's nicer than the one on the NHS, and it only costs me about £30 every 6 months. I'm not going to advertise a particular thing here, but I use the gel for my eye bags as well.
Oh,
and it's
really?
been very, very successful.
Love
I have quite
that.
heavy eye bags, and I just put it on a couple of times a week underneath my eyes, and it's a very gentle, very, very low dose gel. And there's been quite a few studies, which I do in the book, about the effects of estrogen cream on the face. And this is also, let's be clear, incredibly low dose estrogen. You don't want to put your HRT in your face, which is kind of alcohol-based hard stuff. It is the very gentle stuff. And it's really interesting to think, well, of course, if your collagen's gone down by 15% everywhere, why not pump it up? And, there's a lot of fun things here that I'm learning among the very serious ones,
So one last thing I wanted to say about UTIs, because I've experienced this with my mother, is that you think that the symptoms will, sort of be the itching and things like that. But what we really noticed was she went a little bit loop-the-loop. We didn't understand what she was saying. Cognitively, she just completely lost the plot, and we were really worried that, oh my gosh, is this sort of overnight dementia? She's talking like she's on something. And I think, if anybody's listening to this and, perhaps you've got an elderly parent who is not looking after themselves, and they become very susceptible. I think we're 30 times more likely as women than men to get a UTI. Look out for that sort of incomprehension, that like they're losing the plot a bit. Okay, let's keep going with estrogen, because what I have learned since I've been doing this podcast and doing a lot of research for different subjects, we have estrogen everywhere on our bodies. And you do touch on neurodivergence. As we get into midlife and menopause, often we can find that the symptoms that we didn't have before, or we didn't realize, because it used to be boys that were always diagnosed as having ADHD or autism. Now, a lot of women in their 40s and 50s and 60s are finding that their symptoms are likely to be ADHD or even autism. And that is partly to do with estrogen, isn't it? The depletion of estrogen is sort of magnifying those symptoms.
Yeah, well, estrogen and progesterone. And basically, when that disappears, you're left with the kind of very raw you, angry you. And there's a strange sort of clarity that also comes. And there's been a study out of Bournemouth University that shows that people who are already neurodivergent have really hard menopauses, and it can really throw them off that they've found ways to cope, and it can really cause chaos. But I interviewed a couple of people in the book who you wouldn't necessarily say that they were working, they were doing amazing jobs, they were living their lives, but they also were having trouble, and they were masking all the time and being really careful with what they did, and not knowing why they would suddenly have a freak out in a crowd, or bouncing from one task to the other, or whatever it was. And I mean, I'm not a huge expert on neurodivergence, but they were great. And I talked to a woman called Emma Heathcote James, who runs a huge organic soap company, and she would, she could do 20 tasks at once, but she was just sort of exploding around the time of perimenopause. And she got a diagnosis of ADHD, and she realized that was why she was both good and bad at things, is that she was jumping from task to task, but she also had that ability to hyper focus. And she had hyper focused on her business and set it up, and got her soaps into Waitrose and Sainsbury's, and really scaled up the business. But she'd also found, in her personal life, it was all really struggling. She hated taking the train to London, all sorts of things. And, she talks about her diagnosis, and actually there's a bit of autism there too. It's not as simple. She says it's like the sort of MAC rainbow, different colours, and you could be anywhere on that sort of rainbow, and a bit of both. And the other person I interviewed was Rose Matthews, who discovered they were autistic and also non-binary in their late 50s. And they realised why they had been in so many jobs, because they were the whistleblower. They were the person who'd seen things in black and white and called it out. So that in a way it's a superpower. But now they realise, I need to spend a couple of hours by myself if I'm going to an event. I need to have a place to sort of decompress afterwards. I need to schedule my train journey really carefully. And by that sort of level of self-care and self-knowledge, they are living a better life, and they are happier. And that is a real joy to see, because it's just people have been explained to themselves. I think that's basically what's happening.
Totally. I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago now, and all of a sudden it was like a veil lifted, like, oh, now I understand. It's not me being stupid because I mix up dates, forget things, arrive a day late or a day early, or I'm just incredibly messy. But I think understanding your brain, as you say, you can recharge your social battery, and you develop life strategies that help you make the most of what you've got, and really harness the good parts about it, but also let you just handle in a kinder way, a softer way to yourself, not beating yourself up all the time for getting things wrong or butting in. Hard, I must say, doing a podcast that I've had to learn how to not like, but it's helped me understand myself. So I would really advise anyone who felt like, or especially if they notice in their children, like, oh, you know, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time helping our children through their lives, and we forget to turn that mirror on ourselves and think, what do I need to make my life better and more understandable?
I think it's also part of just caring for ourselves. And I think one of the things of almost all the women I talk to, you know, who are in their 40s and 50s, would be carrying this huge burden. And everyone had a different burden, but everyone had emptied the dishwasher more than anyone else in the house, had, you know, looked after the kids more, had taken a career break, so had lost some of their pension, to look after their kids or to look after their mother or whatever it was, or to look after their other half who was doing a more important job that paid more. And all that wait, and all the thing where you get up in the morning, you think, oh, is so-and-so all right? Let me check my diary for that. And it's just not about us. And even those of us, and I had a big career as a film critic at the time, so I was doing a huge job as well as looking after a family and 3 kids and, a sick mother and all that. We just expect that of ourselves because we're feminist superwomen. And also, I didn't expect anything less than of myself. But then when my hormones just went to hell in a handbasket, I suddenly couldn't cope and I couldn't hold everything up. I was just a super tanker keeping going, and I had to jump off the super tanker basically. And that was so shocking, but also suddenly to look after yourself and not be thinking, well, I have to make sure there are 15 meals on the table. If you've got 3 kids and a husband, you've got to make sure there are 15 meals every day. How are you going to order them? How are we going to, and all the other things. And suddenly to just think, you could have a yogurt. It's just me. And the intellectual freedom that gives you and the time and the space, even if you're spending an hour a day more on domestic tasks than those around you, be they your family or be they your flatmates or whatever, but just stopping looking after people all the time, I think is a really important thing if you get the chance to do it a bit and to realise the burdens you have carried for 30 years or 20 years. And also, once you stop looking after all those people, you have time to get involved in politics or get involved in your community or get involved with someone who really needs you, or in my case, become a mad menopause campaigner. But I had time to kind of give myself to something else. And I think given the state of the world at this second, the idea that we will be healthy women in our 50s deciding, here it is, I'm doing this for me and I'm also doing this for X people I want to help or want to work with or have a creative renaissance with, or, but to consider ourselves and our powers, because we are magnificent, we're really experienced, we know what we're doing,
So this is really what your book is all about, is finding that joy of the midlife crisis, that it doesn't have to be the narrative of menopause is something to fear. We're going to hurt all over, we're going to be miserable, we're going to be angry, we're going to be sad, we're going to be anxious. There is a lot of that narrative, but we do know what we can do about that. And we do know that a healthy lifestyle, HRT, if it's the right thing for you, there are so many ways that we can apply these to ourselves and allow ourselves to prioritize our self-care. So I think what you've done with this book is really cover so many kinds of things that we can do for ourselves that doesn't necessarily have to cost anything at all, but just getting in our heads and making us realize that, at the age of 40, 50, 60, we still have got decades to live. I mean, we're looking, if we keep in a healthy body, we might be looking at hitting 100 more frequently. We will be getting that letter from the king, if he's still around when I'm 100. It'll be a king, I suppose. But we have to age-proof ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. I quote in the book, there's a woman called Aviva Wittenberg-Cox, who's a kind of business expert and academic, and she's written about the 4-quarter life. And so your first quarter up to 25 is growing, and then your second quarter is achieving. So from 25 to 50, you're making a family, you're doing your amazing job or career, you're doing whatever. And then from 50 to 75, she calls that becoming, which I really like. So you become the person you really want to be. And then from 75 onward, it's harvesting. But I love that 50 to 75 block. And it might be younger for some people. You've got to start your midlife crisis early if you can. But I think to come to that time in your life and not make a decision to think about what you want to do and what, how you are going to create differently, how are your relationships going to change. You can't just sit there and kind of dwindle away. And, most of us are not going to have a big pension. It's just not going to happen. So we're going to have to work in some sort of way part-time, probably for a lot longer. Do we want to give up being a teacher and become a part-time geologist? Do we want to go back to university? It's quite an exciting time to make a very odd decision. But I really think we need to have a midlife crisis. I mean, obviously there are perfect people who just live their perfect lives and go on living their perfect lives and are brilliant. But for most of us, the idea of a fresh adventure, and it doesn't have to be a lot of money and going to Thailand, it could be a different fresh adventure. I mean, for instance, I'll tell you my bad fresh adventure. My friend who's in the book, who's a psychotherapist, Kalanit, she said, we've got to go to pottery classes together. I've been already, you'll love it. Everybody in midlife has a pottery class. You need it to be creative. Mm-hmm. And we went and did it for 6 weeks. I was by miles the worst in the class, and I ended up really, even on week 6, with just a little pile of mud in the middle of the wheel and the wall sprayed with stuff, and I realised I couldn't get my left hand to my right hand. I'm sort of a bit dyspraxic. I just couldn't do it. I totally failed that midlife kind of barrier, which was pottery. I'm just rubbish at it. But it was a good experience because I had a really good laugh with her. So, what I mean is, bigger things than that. But we ought to try all the things we think we might fail at too, I think.
I think that's a perfect place to end. We should give life a go, do the wackiest, craziest things, go world swimming, go and do what you want, go and walk the length of England if you want to on the salt path. Just do something and don't settle. And read How to Have a Magnificent Midlife Crisis by Kate Muir. How can they find you? I mean, the book is going on sale on 10th of June, I believe. And how can they find out more?
It's going on sale on 5th of June, and my Instagram is Meno Scandal, all one word, MENO Scandal. And I'm going to start a Midlife Crisis Substack. So that will be coming out about the same time as the book. So I will have the secret other stuff in the Substack. And that will be under my own name, Kate Muir. So that will be some more stuff in there.
So sign up for that too. Thank you, Kate. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. I'm going to go off and have my own midlife crisis in a really joyful way. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.